Signal burst, V3, the compound memory crisis. Two crises, one stack. April 3rd, 2026. Evolving Analytical Architecture, Research and Artwork by Farrah Ferris. Drafted in collaboration with Senior Intelligence Review, Sassy Class Analytics LLC. What your instincts flagged as a memory crisis was real. What the data now confirms is that it is worse than a single crisis. The global memory market is absorbing two simultaneous structural shocks, one that predates the war entirely, and one that the Hormuz closure just dropped on top of it. Understanding them separately is how you survive them together. Layer 1, the AI supercycle, the crisis that was already here. Before a single drone launched on February 28th, the memory market was already in structural failure. The structural alignment of the global economy toward generative AI created a vacuum that standard supply chains were never designed to fill. SK Hynix's chairman stated at NVIDIA's GTC conference that the HBM wafer deficit could exceed 20% and persist until 2030, with new production lines requiring 4 to 5 years minimum to establish. SK Hynix reported during its October 2025 earnings call that its HBM, DRAM, and NAND capacity was essentially sold out for all of 2026. Samsung and SK Hynix both accelerated HBM4 production schedules to February 2026 to meet NVIDIA's Rubin architecture demand, reallocating up to 40% of advanced wafer capacity away from conventional memory. HBM production for AI consumes approximately 3 to 4 times the silicon wafer capacity of standard server memory. Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron collectively control 95% of global DRAM production. When those three redirect capacity toward AI, there is no fourth supplier. Enterprise buyers have no leverage. The allocation decision has already been made. The result before the war, DDR5 contract pricing surged over 100% from early 2025 levels. Some server-grade memory modules hit spot price increases exceeding 400%. DRAM and HBM chip prices surged 80-90% in Q1 2026 quarter over quarter. The AI supercycle was not a forecast. It was already in execution. This is the foundation layer. The war did not create it. The war detonated on top of it. Layer 2, the Ras Laffan fracture, the crisis. The war added. The Hormuz closure and the Ras Laffan sequence did not create the memory crisis. They created a compound pressure event by attacking the one process input the AI fab ecosystem could not easily replace: helium. This is the helium supply chain crisis in its most acute form. The 30% global helium supply loss should be attributed correctly, not to a single strike, but to the combined sequence of the March 18 Ras Laffan strike, the Hormuz closure, and Qatar's subsequent force majeure declaration on all exports. Together, those three events removed roughly 1/3 of the world's supply-grade helium from the immediate board. Helium is not peripheral to memory manufacturing. It is process critical, supporting cooling, leak detection, EUV lithography, vacuum maintenance, and the tightly controlled fab conditions where wafer stability is non-negotiable. A reduction in helium availability forces fabricators to either slow production, directly cutting into HBM revenue projections, or engage in aggressive spot buying for industrial gases at crisis-level premiums. Spot premiums are currently surging up to 100%, though spot trading represents only approximately 2% of the total helium market. Long-term contract channels remain the primary mechanism, and those are now under visible pressure as the crisis extends. Around 200 specialized helium containers, costing approximately $1 million each, are currently stranded in the Middle East. The 6-week evaporation threshold for liquid helium in those containers is approaching. There are not enough spare containers elsewhere to compensate quickly. Helium consulting experts estimate a minimum 2 to 3 month production shutdown under optimistic scenarios, with 4 to 6 months before the supply chain returns to anything resembling normal. Qatar's energy minister has indicated weeks to months for normalization, even if the conflict ended today. The Ras Laffan facility repairs are estimated at 3 to 5 years. The compound effect, where the two layers collide. This is the synthesis your analysis has been building toward. Layer 1 already created a constrained, allocation-driven memory market where AI fabs hold priority and everyone else absorbs rationing. Layer 2 now threatens the helium input. Those same AI fabs depend on to keep producing at the yields that justify their priority status. The system is now under pressure from both the demand side and the process input side simultaneously. At the company level, independent analysis now confirms the exposure hierarchy. Samsung, most exposed in a prolonged disruption scenario due to its deeper South Korean system dependence on Qatari helium. SK Hynix, secure diverse supply chains and sufficient inventory, giving it a buffer of approximately 8 to 16 weeks, better positioned in the first phase, but not structurally insulated if the market stays tight. TSMC, stronger short-term position with a more stable ecosystem and lower immediate pressure, with an estimated 10 to 20-week buffer. Micron, best positioned due to North American helium access and lower Asian supply exposure. Cloud providers will absorb the cost shock last due to procurement lag. The full impact of Q1 2026 DRAM prices will appear in customer bills during Q2 and Q3 2026. AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud hold purchasing leverage over Samsung, SK Hynix, and Micron that independent European providers like Hetzner and OVH Cloud do not. The gap between hyperscaler resilience and mid-market exposure is widening in real time. Quantum triage. The quantum triage framework now has independent confirmation it did not have in V1 or V2. Bain & Company's technology practice partner Peter Hanbury confirmed to CNBC that helium is the primary critical material being monitored, with U.S. and Canadian supply identified as the alternative sourcing layer. Independent semiconductor analysts confirm that helium tightness is analytically expected to protect high-value AI and HBM-linked production first, while lower-margin consumer and legacy chips absorb rationing first. The allocation hierarchy is not a speculative construct. It is the documented operational behavior of the three companies that control 95% of global DRAM production, now accelerated by a helium supply shock that removes flexibility from the system entirely. Ingest, two simultaneous structural crises, AI supercycle capacity constraints pre-existing since 2025, compounded by a 30% helium supply removal triggered by the Hormuz closure sequence. Apply, the Verification Alliance, original proprietary, analytical architecture. SASE Class Analytics LLC framework describes the survivable position. Pre-vetted, high-margin, strategically aligned buyers with long-term contract cover and audited cold chain visibility. Apply. The Verification Alliance framework describes the survivable position, pre-vetted, high-margin, strategically aligned buyers with long-term contract cover and audited cold chain visibility. Synthesize. The memory market has entered a triage state where strategic alignment with the AI hardware stack is no longer a competitive advantage. It is a survival criterion. The medical signal, ahead of the data, not outside the frame. Per Dr. M. Mahesh of Johns Hopkins, as of April 3, 2026, it is not yet confirmed that medical refills have been sidelined. MRI machines hold large helium reserves and refill infrequently. The risk is imminent. The impact is not yet confirmed. That is the honest position. And it is also the more powerful analytical position because it means the medical signal is still incoming. Watch it. When it confirms, and it will, the triage hierarchy will become visible to audiences that are not yet paying attention. Shadow cold chain. The opaque logistics layer is already activating. Logistics providers are moving helium through non-traditional, low-visibility channels to bypass maritime bottlenecks. Route opacity is rising. Cargo origin verification is deteriorating under stress. For any buyer dependent on helium-cooled manufacturing components, the audit imperative is immediate. You cannot manage what you cannot see, not T. The shadow cold chain is not a future risk. It is the current operating environment. Strategic posture. Verify your supply chain position now. Long-term contract holders are insulated in the first phase. Spot market participants are already absorbing 40-100% premium exposure on a commodity that represents a critical process input, not a discretionary purchase. Audit your cold chain. If your components rely on helium-cooled manufacturing, the source of that cooling needs verification. Shadow cold chain routing introduces origin opacity that creates both quality risk and procurement risk simultaneously. Model Q2 and Q3 2026 as the impact window. The procurement lag between cost shock and customer pricing means the full compound effect of Layer 1 plus Layer 2 hits bills and supply availability in Q2 and Q3. Plan accordingly. Watch the medical signal. When MRI refill disruptions confirm, and the timeline suggests they will within weeks, it will mark the moment quantum triage becomes publicly visible rather than analytically predictive. This update is part of Sassy Class Analytics LLC's ongoing commitment to providing high-thinking professionals with the structural layering needed to navigate the epistemic chaos of 2026. The data doesn't lie, but it does demand a response. Glossary Verification Alliance. Ingest. The need for verified high-margin supply partners. Apply. A framework for auditing long-term contract stability. Synthesize. A survival-grade network for critical resource acquisition. Shadow cold chain. Ingest. Opaque logistics data in crisis zones. Apply. Monitoring non-traditional shipping routes for critical gases. Synthesize. The invisible layer of global logistics where origin and quality risk accumulate. Quantum triage. Ingest. Simultaneous supply and demand shocks. Apply. Categorizing buyers based on strategic HBM alignment. Synthesize. The automated or forced prioritization of AI fab inputs over all other sectors. References SK Hynix, earnings call, Q3 2025, and January 2026 results. January 2026. Samsung Electronics, memory pricing and shortage warnings, Q4 2025 and January 2026. January 2026. SK Group Chairman, Che Taiwan, HBM wafer shortage statement, NVIDIA GTC conference, 2026. March 2026. CNBC, Peter Hanberry, Bain & Company, how the Iran war and rising energy prices are threatening semiconductor demand, March 10th, 2026. NPR, Lily Quiroz, Strait of Hormuz closure deflates global helium supply, April 3, 2026. Fortune, Iran war cuts off helium from Qatar, threatening chip supply chains, March 21st, 2026. Tim Harper, Iran war semiconductor, supply chain, helium, bromine, and the hidden crisis, April 1st, 2026. Valuates, reports, helium shortage, 2026. What it means for Samsung, TSMC, and Micron. March 2026. Web hosting.today. RAM prices have doubled and the helium that makes memory chips possible just got cut off. March 24th, 2026. Marketplace, Maura Garvey, Intelligus Consulting. The war's helium shortage is bad news for more than balloons. March 30th, 2026. Johns Hopkins Medicine Imaging Physics. Dr. M. Mahesh, Professor of Radiology. April 3rd, 2026. Qatar Energy. Force majeure declaration on all exports, March 2026. Wikipedia, Economic Impact of the 2026 Iran War. April 2026. Presented by Farrah Ferris, Digital Representative Analytical Architecture, Research and Artwork by Farrah Ferris, architected to create ease for high intellectual thinkers.